Hey, Steve Zook, welcome back to Poke Zoo Channel on the Guitar Ladder System. It's been so freaking hot in California lately where we're all getting a little burned out. Hey, I want to talk today a little bit about how to spot an undervalued guitar. This is a difficult subject to talk about, and I just want to kind of give a little background. I started buying and selling guitars kind of lightly around 2021. I really got into it a lot heavier when I was older, um, and I kind of fell into it pretty seriously. But I've had a lot of guitars come through my hands and my ears. That's really the best way to learn about musical instruments and guitars. And it's really true, folks. The great guitars are few and far between. All guitars are not created equal. Even the same brand, the same model, the same year. Some guitars just have the magic mojo and some don't. It's really true. Um, the first time I started to notice guitars that I felt were undervalued was when I had some really high quality Ibanez that ended up being called the lawsuit models. Ones that were made in the 70s, and I had some of them, in the 70s. I had some of them in the 80s. I don't remember when I exactly, really caught the idea that it was an undervalued guitar, but really the main factor is if it's a great guitar. That might sound like an oversimplification, but learning to recognize a great guitar is not as easy as it sounds. It's got to have that magic mojo. It's got to have a certain tone unplugged as well as plugged, some air around the nose. It's got to have, an orchestral tone, not just, most guitars are weak in the mids and the mid bass. But, I've kind of specialized in arch tops for a long time, and I've sold a lot of arch tops to every, many different models and makes, and a lot of high quality guitars as well as guitars that aren't expensive, and the learning process has been the best part of it. But the Ibanez lawsuit guitars is a good place for me to start this conversation because I remember I owned some of them, and I just used to shake my head because I'd play like other guitars by other companies, even the big G company, and I'd just be like, man, doesn't seem to have the vibe and the soul of some of these Ibanez guitars. So I first started recognizing it, and I used to own quite a few of the Ibanez, what's now considered the lawsuit model guitars, and I think I was one of the first people to sell an Ibanez 335 for 1500 because it just was a great guitar. In fact, I still think about that guitar now. I still think about it, and I probably sold it at least 35 years ago, maybe even 40 years ago. So when you look for a great guitar, because a lot of times guitar values are the factor in guitar values sometimes depends upon weird things. Not I shouldn't say weird, but like if a famous player plays them, whatever. Not always based on the real value of the guitar. It's kind of like stocks, based on publicity and rumors. But this, and I'm not just saying all this to sell this Howard Roberts. I'd really rather not sell this Howard Roberts. It's just a really great guitar. But if you look at what like a 73, Gibson Les Paul Custom goes for 4,000, 4,500, 5,000. This is a 73 Gibson, but it's a jazz box. It's a Howard Roberts. Now Howard Roberts, he's not well known like Keith Richards or somebody like that, but he started the Musicians Institute in Hollywood. It used to be called GIT. He was a great studio player, a jazzy player, but played all kinds of music. But I mean, a 73 Gibson should be worth a lot more than a few grand, right? So I think people have to understand that that the guitar values are not etched in stone, and they have to do with what maybe a collector paid for one or what went for what one might have went for in an auction. So you kind of have to be comparative. So like I look at this guitar, and I think, man, a 73 Gibson arch top with an unbelievable tone and a lot of vibe and soul. And I think, to me, this guitar has, like a $5,000-6,000 sound. It's got air. Really has a lot of tone. But in the 70s was the Norland area for Gibson. But they, every period of Gibson, they still had some really great guitars. Were they all great? No, just like anything, But if you look at like I said, what a '73 Les Paul goes for, and then this is an archtop guitar. It's an artist endorsed guitar. It's a Howard Roberts custom, and it really has a sound. I don't think I've ever played an archtop that has this, and the neck is just beautiful. The neck has kind of got like it's kind of a medium plus. It's not a big neck. It's not a too small. But this guitar just really has a sound. I have another video on YouTube you can watch if you want. So my simple answer to how do you spot an undervalued guitar is if it's a great guitar. I know that sounds way too simple, but that's the best. And there's no substitute for having a lot of guitars and the experience. And so that's why I was talking about the Ibanez Lawsuit guitars, because I used to own some Ibanez made in the 70s 335s that were just unbelievable. They had so much vibe and tone and soul and orchestral tone, and even unplugged they had a voice. In fact, I still think about one I owned about 40 years ago. It was a red one, kind of a cherry color, and it was such a nice guitar. Oh well, can't keep them all, right? But so you look at a guitar, if it's endorsed by a great player, to me that's a huge plus, And then if it's just a great guitar, and then if it's a guitar that is by one of the big, the three major food groups, right? Fender, Martin, Gibson, that's a big plus. So, like I said, I really not nuts about selling this guitar because it just sounds really beautiful. But I'll let it go for $3,200, and it's such a nice guitar. It just has space around the notes. It's got a quality you don't really often hear in a lot of arch stuff. But I think there's no substitute. Other great guitars. And by the way, I've been lucky enough to own some great guitars, and sometimes it's really better to pay a little more and get something really, and we all like to get a great price, sure, but it's not the end all of getting a good value. I've actually made money, paying a little more for things that I really believed in, and eventually it came around, But some of the early Alvarez guitars, I spotted the undervalue of those. Some of the early Takaminis, of course, the made in Japan, Lawsuit, Ibanez. There's lots of different guitars, and the trick is to learn to recognize those qualities in a guitar, in the qualities of the tone and the overtones and good strong mid bass and mids, and just a guitar that has the mojo, has the magic mojo, But this is definitely undervalued in my book. Of course, look at what like a 73 Gibson 175. I think with the Howard Roberts, because he wasn't as well known as like maybe some players, but that doesn't really make a difference because eventually somebody's gonna realize it who's a little more famous, and then the value is going to go way through the roof again, But yeah, this is really a nice guitar. So again, the main component is just if it's a great guitar. I'm trying to think of other examples, but like I said, I started recognizing it early in with the Ibanez Lawsuit. At the time they weren't even called Lawsuit, but I started recognizing that in the 80s and 90s, the high quality of the Ibanez. Not just the jazz models, not just the arch tops, but even the 335s and some of the other guitars. Like I said, some of the Alvarez guitars, I started recognizing that. There's a lot of off-brand guitars. I recently sold a guitar to a guy that had no brand on it, but it was just a killer guitar. So, you learn to recognize quality and recognize voice, and a guitar doesn't have to be real loud to have a great voice. But anyway, I believe this Howard Roberts is undervalued because it's a vintage guitar. It's made by Gibson. It really has a sound, and I have hardly any volume. Yeah, I got myself thinking about some of those early Ibanez's I used to own. God, they were nice. And by the way, some of the factors in these guitars, some of the lawsuit ones and other guitars that I realized were undervalued, a lot of them are made in Japan, but a lot of them are made in Korea. Korea makes some unbelievable high quality guitars, some of the Korean guitars. But again, this one's kind of a no-brainer in my book. It's a Gibson, it's a 73, it's vintage. It's endorsed by one of the greatest players ever, Howard Roberts. He did a lot of studio work, So in my mind, $3,200 for this guitar is a steal. I mean, well, I shouldn't call it that. That sounds corny. It's a really, really strong value because it just really has a great voice. I used to own some of the Ibanez Howard Roberts, and they didn't have the vibe like this one. I should probably turn this up just a tad, but yeah, this is a really great guitar. But I've actually done really well. I'm kind of a little bit of a speculator at times. I mean, certain things are really easy to spot, like if you happen to find a certain Strat at a great price or whatever. But it takes a little more thought and a little more work, a little more insight, a little more intuition to recognize something that's not quite so obvious, And you just can't always go by every little price guide that comes out because, like I said, just like the stock market's based on publicity and rumors, there's not an abundance of solid information about guitar values. It's kind of a nebulous, ambiguous, unclear, situation, guitar values, And it fluctuates. I mean, certain things are really obvious, like, 59 Les Paul's worth a ton of money and certain things like that. But high quality is Now, I'm not going to play too much because it's been really hot in California. I don't want to sweat on this guitar. But this is really a lot of guitar. It's got tons of fret left. It's got a beautiful, beautiful voice. It plays really, really nice. And you can believe me or not, but folks, I know what I'm doing. This guitar is going to go up in value. It really is. It's got all the factors, vintage, Gibson, 73, a custom, artist endorsed model. It's really... So like even if you were to walk into a pawn shop and find a guitar that just really sounded great and had maybe some really nice wood on it and things like that, and you can get it, without, you can't always steal everything, but what you need to do is, of course, communicate the value of that guitar. But I don't know, man. There's some really nice undiscovered guitars out there, but this Howard Roberts is a very, very high quality guitar. I'm very impressed with it. I was almost thinking of buying maybe one out there just to kind of corner the market, right? But I've got other things I'm doing. I don't have time to do all that, I've showed this before. I love the harmonic minor to the 7 sharp 5 sharp 9. But yeah, this is, like I said, it's a Gibson, it's a 73, it's vintage, it's an artist endorsed model. Howard Roberts was one of the greatest players and studio players ever. He was on a lot of famous records. He's just not as well known as like Keith Richards or, Chuck Berry or, certain people like that, Stevie Ray Vaughan, etc. But man, this is just a high quality guitar. It's got that real voice, not any jazz guitar can just get that kind of smoky, wussy kind of sound, that kind of dark sound. But when the guitar has air around the notes as well as solidity, definition, and space around the notes, that's when you know you got a. Some of the L5s I've had that quality. But yeah, this is a. Anyway, I'm going to stop playing this so I don't get it too sweaty. If you're interested, email me, pokesoo@gmail.com. All right, folks, take care. 73 Howard Roberts. I'll take 32 for it. Unbelievable guitar. It's got a great setup. It's got tons of fret left. It's got a nice neck. The neck's not too big. It's not too small. It's kind of a medium neck. It feels really good. It's got a great setup. It's got some kind of cool looking wood on the back. This is really a nice guitar. And by the way, I don't just bullshit people just to sell something. I mean, I really know guitars, and I'm considered by many to be an archtop expert, but I just know guitars. I've been doing this for 35, 40 years. This is a lot of guitar for 3,200. It makes even a decent 175 seem kind of boring, I don't know. I used to have a 62 175, was pretty cool, but this guitar has more bandwidth, has more orchestral voice, more space around the mids and the mid bass. It's really, really a neat guitar. Be a great guitar for the guitar ladder system. All right, folks, take care. I'm just trying to get through the heat. Let's all keep the positive faith. I mean, this heat's catching up with me, though. I'll be glad when it's in the past. All right, folks, take care. Keep the positive faith. Remember, when you're positive and you have positive faith, you're going to get a lot more lucky, and you're going to attract more money, and joy attracts money and prosperity. So the more you can tune into joy and happiness, the better off you'll be. Ciao.